Ja, god kväll på er och shalom, vänner. Jag är tillbaka efter dygnspass igen. Man måste ju arbeta ibland också. Profetiska nyheter idag, torsdag 16 november 2023. Jag skrev det här på Facebook idag. I en värld av lögner och hyckleri. Sjukhuset i Gaza, alltså det här Al-Shifa, var terroristorganisationens Hamas centra. Tydligen är även sjukhuspersonalen hjärntvättad och hjälper Hamas. Så nedrigt att det sen går ut i den lättlurade mainstream-media och ljuger och skyller på Israel. I en värld av lögner. Många mediejournalister väljer att tro på lögnhalsar som är terrorister istället för en demokratisk nation som försvarar sig med den armé som har högsta moralen i världen, IDF. I en värld av hyckleri. Ja, ibland så blir man upprörd och då måste man uttrycka sig, för det är vad media förtjänar, anser jag faktiskt. Lite andra nyheter också. Dagens nyheter. Idag, Ryssland har börjat dirigera asylsökande över gränsen till Finland. Ett medvetet sätt att utöva press mot Finland. Och det här är troligen bara början, därför är det inte så konstigt att Finland snabbt reagerade med att stänga 4 gränsövergångar. Och Amir Safati under dagen fortsatte IDF-styrkor att söka igenom Shifa-sjukhusets område och fördjupade sökandet på de andra sjukhusen. Under skanningarna hittades nya fynd som tyder på betydande underjordisk infrastruktur på sjukhusen, och våra styrkor arbetar för att avslöja dem. De samlade bevisen bevisar att Hamas använder sjukhusen för terroriständamål. Ju mer vi fördjupar den här operationen ökar trycket på Hamas och urholkar fler högkvarter, skadar fler tunnlar, eliminerar fler agenter och störtar fler organisationschefer. Desto större är chansen att få tillbaka våra kidnappade, eftersom den här fienden bara förstår makt. Och vi förklarar för honom mycket väl vad makt är. Ja, så är det tyvärr i Mellanöstern. Om man inte slår tillbaka, om inte Israel försvarar sig, då fortsätter bara terror. Och allt, massakrer och vad som helst. Det är så där nere. Finns inget annat språk mot dessa terrorister än makt. Det är det enda. Och så IDFs uttalande här från Al-Shifa-fynden under sjukhuset och tunnelnätverk där. Vi har tydlig information som tyder på ett samband mellan Hamas aktivitet på Shifa-sjukhuset och närvaron av gisslan. Dessutom genomför vi grundliga undersökningar av bärbara datorer och annan teknisk utrustning som upptäcks på vårdcentralen. Våra pågående undersökningar syftar till att få en omfattande förståelse för situationen på Shifa-sjukhuset och ta itu med eventuella hot som dessa fynd utgör. Ja, vi önskar IDF all framgång med Guds hjälp att segra i detta och få gisslan fri hem till Israel igen. Det ber vi Gud om. Nu kommer en video här från End Time Ministry. End Time om det kontantlösa samhället och det kommande märket 666. Det är precis det kanske som vi också har fört fram ganska länge och så många av oss ser och förstår av det som är på gång i Agenda 2030, där man då vill ha oss under diktatorisk kontroll. Och det gäller också, han tar också upp här på End Time om ett digitalt ID. Vi såg ju redan under pandemin eller plandemin, vilket man nu väljer att uttrycka, hur man behandlar människor olika. De som tog vaccin fick tillgång på olika saker och fick resa. Medan vi som inte tar covid-vaccin hade stängda dörrar på en hel del ställen. Det kan vi leva utan i och för sig, men det är ett sätt att behandla människor olika, och det är precis som man gör i Kina, där man får sociala poäng om man lyder staten, och man får då minuspoäng eller mindre poäng om man inte lyder. Det vill säga om man är kristen till exempel och går på gudstjänst eller träffar andra kristna, då får man minuspoäng. Ja, denna världen är som den är. Som jag började här, en värld av lögner och hyckleri. Det är inte bara det som tur är, men det är väldigt mycket. Själviskhet och girighet som styr den här världen, när mammon är guden eller avguden hos de flesta. Men vi vet att vi som tror på Jesus, vi vet att han är segerfursten och fridsfursten som vi kan lita på i alla situationer och som tar hand om oss och leder oss i allt. Hur vi än har det, både personligt och i vår närhet, och hur det är i världen, så vet vi att vi får lita på Gud, förtrösta på honom, som Guds ord säger, uppmanar till. Så kommer den här videon då en påminnelse om vad som är på gång. Vi är så upptagna nu med det som händer i Israel och Gaza, så att det här kommer ju lite i skymundan, men vi har ju lagt ut väldigt mycket tidigare på hemsidan om just detta och vad som är på gång då med det digitala ID:t och så vidare. Så blir det en påminnelse här. Så jag tackar för mig och jag önskar er Guds välsignelse. Och shalom.
Let me dive off into this last one here real quick. It would be precursors to the mark of the beast. Because I want to kind of give you an overall worldview. What's going on around the world? Because it's not just happening right here in Texas or in the United States. When the Bible talks about precursors to the mark of the beast, Revelation chapter 13, verse 16 and 17. He will cause all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their forehead, without which they're not going to be able to buy or sell. Moving us off of a cashless society onto a totally digital platform is the only way that they would be able to implement this. Think about that. If cash was still available, and stores and different things were still taking cash, how could they implement the mark of the beast? They couldn't. Cash is freedom. The government cannot know what you're doing if you use cash. But once you start to use your debit card or your credit card or Venmo and all these different ways where you can use your phone and everything, now you're creating a digital footprint. So the bankers and the government, everybody knows exactly what you're doing. Your data, you would not believe how much your data is being used by companies all over the world to market to you and everything. I can be talking to somebody, I can talk to my wife on one of our date nights, and we can talk about a new car that we would love to have. I can't afford, but I'd love to have. And I would love to have one of the new Toyota Sequoias. Oh man, I love those. Now I can't afford one, but I'd love to have one. Well, we both love them, but I will get things on my phone about, almost immediately. By the time I order, I'll get things on Facebook and different things about Toyota Sequoias. And so I'm thinking, they're listening to my conversations because they're marketing to you, but there will come a time in the future, they will try to control your finances as a result of all this, because we've moved off of cash and now we're on a digital society. Well, it's happening around the world. RIPT, R-I-P-T, the news organization, they posted an article and it says Europe's new digital identity wallet, a guarantor of digital security or a backdoor to tyranny. Now listen to this. Last Wednesday, Thierry Breton, EU's internal market commissioner, proudly announced on Twitter X that he had struck a deal with the members of the European Parliament, the MEPs, to create a European digital identity wallet which would permit all EU citizens to have a secured e-identity for their lifetime. Okay? Sounds pretty innocent at this point, right? Except unless you understand Revelation 13, 16 through 18. According to the European Commission's own website, the European digital identity can be used for a whole range of transactions, including providing personal identification on and offline, showing birth certificates, medical certificates, opening a bank account, filing tax returns, applying for a university, storing a medical prescription, renting a car, checking into a hotel. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, right? Several people, including the Dutch member of the European Parliament, or an MEP, Rob Roos, they've raised concerns, though, that a centralized, government-controlled digital ID could put European privacy and mobility rights in jeopardy. Now listen at this, guys. In theory, a universal European, now I say in theory, okay, a universal European digital ID could be programmed in such a way that the citizen has full control over which parts of his or her digital wallet he shares at any given moment and which he or she does not share. Now that's in theory, but in practice, it would be highly naive to assume that a programmable Europe-wide digital ID controlled by a centralized bureaucracy could not sooner or later be exploited to nudge, or let's say shove, people into complying with the policies that happen to be favored by the powers that be. And it does not require a wild leap of imagination to envisage the sorts of ways a European digital ID could be leveraged to erode the equality and freedom of Europeans. Since the very same individuals that are the public face of the ID, the digital ID initiative, were the ones who set in motion the most pervasive system of biosurveillance in the history of Europe. Now we're going to get deep into this, so listen carefully. Namely, the so-called COVID digital certificates. Now, the operation of the COVID digital certificates, which was approved by both the European Commission, the same one now pushing for the digital ID system, and the European Parliament. So if you were in Europe, you'd feel real comfortable about this, wouldn't you? Having just come through all the COVID digital stuff. Well, these are the same ones, the European Commission that pushed that, and the European Parliament, that can give them a fairly clear, it can give us a fairly clear idea of the uses to which these European technocrats, that they're likely to put a digital ID system and to get it to do if they're given a chance. So, the COVID digital certificate was used to compel citizens who had not received the COVID vaccine within a certain time period to obtain a costly and inconvenient COVID test every time they crossed the European border, and was even used to deny entry to unvaccinated citizens at cultural and, let's say, recreational venues across Europe, sporting events, things like that. In other words, the COVID digital certificate served as a mechanism for coercing citizens into injecting a certain medication into their bloodstream. I'm not saying there was anything wrong with any vaccine. I'm not anti-vaccine. I was anti this past vaccine. That's for another discussion for another day. And created a two-tier, I'm actually anti-government coercion is what I'm against. And so, anyway, we'll talk about the vaccines at some other point. And created a two-tier society in which the unvaccinated were treated as a new social and political underclass. Now, imagine if a centrally controlled European digital certificate was offered to all European citizens as a tool for accessing, let's say, wide range of services from air travel and hotel stays, car rentals, access to recreational venues, and access to online digital services. Initially, let's say presumably the certificate would be optional and citizens could use other valids for validating their identity. Then, under the pretext of, let's say, enhancing citizens' security, the certificate might very well become obligatory for an increasing number of transactions. If you want, let's say, government health care or whatever. Now, the next step would be to gradually expand the information contained on the certificate and use the certificate as a way to deny or approve citizens' access to, let's say, certain services based on their spending habits, their vaccination status, or remember, these are the same people wanting this digital wallet as we're pushing the digital vaccination card. So imagine if they were to maybe approve a citizen's access based on their vaccination status or their social credit score. Of course, this is not something that we can be 100% certain is going to happen, but the recent implementation of that vaccine apartheid in Europe that they went through should disabuse us of any illusion that Europe's political leadership are committed to respecting and defending their civil liberties or their equal access to public amenities and services. What if they just said no? Then what? I mean, politicians like Thierry Breton and Ursula von der Leyen and those members of the European Parliament and member state governments that cheered them on during the pandemic, they were prepared to treat citizens like, almost like cattle or disease vectors to be vaccinated and tested en masse with scant regard for their personal medical history or risk factors. So it's surely only a matter of time before people with this sort of contempt for individual liberty would be inclined to take advantage of a technology like a universal digital ID as a lever to control people's private choices with a view of advancing their own careers and policy goals. Think about this. Quite a few citizens said no to an experimental vaccine, and quite a few citizens still question the scientific and political rationale for imposing burdensome carbon taxes because of this propaganda of human-induced global warming with climate change, forcibly expropriating farmland based on climate directives, and people are saying no to these 15-minute cities, making space for transgender ideologies in hospitals and classrooms, or abstaining from whatever the powers that be deemed to be hate speech. But what better method to induce public compliance with unpopular or controversial public policies and laws than to reward compliance with enhanced mobility and enhanced access to social amenities and services, but then on the other hand punish somebody who is non-compliant with reduced mobility, reduced access to services and amenities? Isn't that exactly what the digital COVID certificate, which was a brainchild of the same commission that's pushing this, did? So, can you see how they could use a potential digital platform to economically sanction people if our banking went completely digital, or a central bank digital currency? Now, we'll have to live through some of this to see how it all specifically plays out. I know the mark of the beast is coming. How that is fully implemented, I don't know at this point. But I'm telling you what, I'm reading everything I can get my hands on. And the central bank digital currency and these global IDs, they're two of the main things that I can see pointing us straight towards the mark of the beast system. And I'm glad there are people here in the United States that are fighting it. But there are nations around the world that are just moving full off into this stuff, you guys. And I'm praying for them, because I know that the mark of the beast system is coming in the majority of the parts of the world. And so, what are we talking about here? I'm giving you a world view. Prophecy is happening all over the world. It's happening so fast, it's hard for us to keep up with everything. What does it do to me? It gives me a sense of urgency that I have to preach and teach the gospel of the kingdom of God around the entire world, because the second coming of Jesus Christ and the rapture is just ahead of us now. God bless you, my friend.